Two tiny German Shepherd puppies dangled from a tree, their fragile bodies twisted in rusted chains. No one heard their cries. No one. Except the one he was trying to destroy. Their mother? But what kind of monster does this to puppies? And why was he waiting for her? This story isn't just about cruelty. It's about loyalty, revenge, and a mother who would give everything to save her young. What happens next will haunt you, but it will also restore your faith and courage. Clearwater Ridge, a sleepy mountain town tucked beneath the snow-covered ridges of northern Alberta, held its breath in the stillness of winter. It was the kind of place where the days came gently and the nights passed in quiet surrender. But not that morning. Emma Reed stepped out of the front door, zipping up her forest green coat against the biting wind. She was in her early 30s, lean and tall, with freckled cheeks and auburn hair pulled back into a low ponytail. She walked with purpose, but not without warmth. There was a tiredness in her shoulders, a quiet echo from a miscarriage she had suffered 2 winters ago. It had changed her, softened her sharp edges into something steadier, something more watchful. She had never been much for crowds since. Beside her walked Luna, a 5-year-old German Shepherd with a thick sable coat, deep amber eyes, and the alert posture of a dog who had once run toward gunfire. She moved stiffly this morning, favoring her rear left leg, a scar from her final mission as a police K-9. Luna had a history, one etched into muscle and memory. She had helped bring down a notorious drug runner in a high-speed mountain pursuit, earning both medals and a bullet wound before retiring into civilian life. Emma opened the back of the SUV and patted the folded blanket. "Come on, girl," she said softly. Luna obeyed with a groan, her hind legs pushing off the frosty ground. The vet appointment was routine, just a follow-up to monitor the old injury, but Emma always made sure to stay beside Luna, even in the waiting room. That kind of loyalty was earned both ways. James, Emma's husband, watched them leave from the living room window. He was in his mid-30s, stockier than Emma, with a messy beard and clear blue eyes that held more questions than answers. A journalist by trade and instinct, James worked freelance now, researching, writing, and sometimes obsessing over stories that didn't pay, but mattered. Years of chasing headlines had turned his optimism into realism. But Luna? She had brought something back to him, a sense of center, a reason to stay. He slid the glass door open and called out, "Max! Toby!" 2 furry blurs answered. Max was the bigger one, with a rich golden brown coat and a white blaze down his chest. He was bold, energetic, and endlessly curious. Toby, slightly smaller, was pure black with deep brown eyes and a cautious step. He followed Max everywhere like a shadow. Both pups were barely 3 months old, playful, innocent, and born under Luna's watchful eye. James tossed a red rubber ball across the yard. Max barreled after it, snow flying up in bursts. Toby trailed behind, tail wagging. James checked his watch. 9:07 a.m. "Be good," he said, mostly to himself, before heading inside to start a pot of coffee and review notes for an article on rural water contamination. He left the sliding door cracked, as always, so the pups could come in and out. The backyard was fenced in. Safe. But the thing about evil is, it doesn't always break in. Sometimes it walks in the same way it once walked out. At 9:38 a.m., James returned to the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. No barking, no paws tapping across hardwood. That's what struck him first. "Max? Toby?" he called again, stepping onto the deck. Silence. He scanned the snow-covered yard, just footprints from earlier, no signs of struggle, no damage to the fence. He opened the gate, walked down the steps, eyes darting. And then he saw it. A scrap of fabric, Toby's red neckerchief, half buried near the far corner of the fence. There was a smear of dark red on it. James felt his stomach drop. He bolted back inside and went straight for the hallway cabinet where they kept the security camera monitor. His fingers trembled slightly as he scrolled through the morning footage. At 9:12 a.m., movement. The figure was blurry, partly obscured by a snowdrift in the trees beyond the fence. Male, judging by his build. Average height. He wore a dark parka with the hood drawn up, face hidden. He walked with a purpose, not rushed, not frantic, like someone revisiting familiar ground. James leaned forward as the man paused at the gate. Then, the sound. A short, high-pitched whistle, sharp, rhythmic. a sound Luna had been trained to respond to. The puppies did too, instinctively. Their little heads turned toward it. Max ran first. Toby hesitated, but followed. The man opened the gate, not with force, but with a key. That realization made James clench the arms of the chair. The figure scooped the pups into a thick wool blanket, tucked them under one arm, then turned and walked calmly back toward the trees. Total time, less than 3 minutes. James rewound and rewatched. No broken locks. No smashed panels. Whoever it was had known the code, or had made a copy of the gate key. Either way, they knew dogs. And they knew Luna. He picked up his phone, almost called the local police. But something stopped him. Not fear. Instinct. This wasn't random. He closed the laptop and walked outside again. Snow had begun falling. He kneeled by the spot where the scarf had dropped and touched it. Still damp. The blood was fresh. Not enough to mean serious injury. Just enough to send a message. When Emma and Luna returned around noon, Luna leapt out of the car before the engine cut. She sniffed once, then again, then let out a low growl. Her eyes locked onto the far fence corner. Her body stiffened, tail raised, fur bristling. She bolted toward the spot and began to dig, frantic. Emma came running. "What's wrong?" James met her with the scarf in hand. Her face crumpled as she took it. "No one saw anything," he said, voice hoarse. "But I saw the footage. Someone used a command whistle, just like the ones from her K9 training." Emma looked at Luna, still pawing at the snow with desperate force. "They were after her, weren't they?" James stared into the woods, jaw tightening. "I think they were after revenge." And somewhere beyond those trees, 2 puppies were waiting in the dark. James barely slept that night. The shadows on the walls shifted with each passing hour, and the cold outside seemed to seep into his chest, no matter how tightly he pulled the blanket over himself. Emma lay next to him, unmoving but clearly awake, her breathing shallow and strained. Downstairs, Luna paced the floor, her claws ticking softly against the hardwood like a metronome of grief. Every few minutes, she would stop, sniff the air, and whine, a low, guttural sound that pierced deeper than any alarm ever could. The house, once filled with puppy yips and the clatter of bowls, now felt hollow. By morning, James was hunched over his desk, the blue glow of his laptop casting harsh lines across his face. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. He wasn't searching social media or scrolling forums. No, James knew better than to expect easy answers. Instead, he dug into a private folder he hadn't opened in years. Luna's cases. The folder contained every major article and police report he had collected while shadowing Luna's career during her final years on the force. It was once meant for a book, a tribute to working dogs who had saved lives, changed lives. But he never finished it. Life got in the way. Now, the files had become a map leading him back through the past, a past that suddenly mattered more than ever. He clicked through the names. Some were gone, others behind bars, but one stood out, not just in memory, but in tone. Travis Reed. The name sent a chill down James's back. Travis had been a mid-level drug runner, operating out of a now-defunct lumber warehouse outside Edmonton. What made him different wasn't just his brutality, but his obsession with control. He had once forced a rival to swallow a packet of heroin and locked him in a freezer, just to watch the timeline. In 2018, Travis had evaded police in a foot chase through a narrow stretch of forest. Luna, then a younger, sharper K9, had tracked him solo for nearly 2 kilometers and found him hiding under the floorboards of an abandoned trailer. She bit deep into his leg before backup arrived. Travis fought back, cracking her rib with a metal rod before being restrained. As he was dragged away, bloodied and screaming, he turned back and spat. "That bitch ruined my life. I'll return the favor someday." No one took it seriously, but James did now. He sat back, eyes locked on the screen, then stood and reached for his jacket. "I'm heading out," he told Emma, who had been standing silently in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself. She nodded, saying nothing. Luna stood behind her, tense and waiting. James stopped to pet her head. "We'll find them," he whispered. Clearwater's police department was little more than 4 rooms inside a beige government building next to the post office. Sergeant Donna Briggs manned the front desk. In her mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and a deep voice from years of smoking and shouting over radio static, Donna was both respected and largely feared in town. She had seen too many tragedies to sugarcoat anything. She raised an eyebrow as James entered. "You look like hell." "I'm looking into a name. Travis Reed," he said without preamble. Donna exhaled, leaned back, and crossed her arms. "That freak just got out last month. Parole, good behavior. Pisses me off every time I sign those releases." "Is he in Clearwater?" "No address on file. Supposedly moved in with a cousin near Redwater, but that lead went cold." "Any way I can see his parole paperwork?" Donna gave him a long look. "You think he's involved in your pups?" "I know he is." She sighed, turned to her computer, and after a few clicks, printed a page. "Off the record," she said, sliding it over. Travis's listed emergency contact was a woman named Samantha Dyer, living in a trailer compound near a truck stop 2 hours east. No phone number. James thanked her and left without another word. Meanwhile, Luna was not resting. That night, Emma let her out for what was meant to be a short walk. But Luna tugged at the leash like a wild animal, nose glued to the ground. She dragged Emma to the edge of the woods behind their house, to a cluster of low shrubs near the back fence. There, half buried under leaves and snow, was a torn scrap of cloth, rough canvas, dirty and stained. Luna pawed at it, then lay down beside it, whining. Emma picked it up. There were faint brown smears and, unmistakably, strands of golden fur clinging to the edges. Max's. The cloth had been placed deliberately, not discarded. It reeked of manipulation. Whoever had taken the pups was playing a game, and the message was clear: come find them. Emma called James. He arrived within 15 minutes, headlights sweeping through the woods. As he examined the cloth, his hands tightened into fists. "They're baiting her," he muttered. "They want her to track them." "She will," Emma whispered. "She already is." James crouched beside Luna and scratched behind her ear. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the black woods, her ears perked for a sound no human could hear. Inside the house that night, James reopened his laptop and typed one word into his search bar: Samantha Dyer. There wasn't much. A petty theft charge, 2 evictions, a photo from 5 years ago, long, stringy hair, sunken eyes, a face hardened by meth and misfortune. But James didn't need a full file to understand. People like Samantha didn't protect people like Travis. They enabled them. He sat back, thinking. If Travis had no listed home and Samantha was unstable, where would he go? Somewhere remote, familiar, private. He opened his map of the region and clicked on marked forestry routes. An old article he'd written flashed in his memory about an illegal logging trail 20 kilometers west of Clearwater, used briefly by drug runners before being shut down. He zoomed in. There it was, a hunting cabin, long abandoned near a frozen creek. No cell signal, no neighbors. The perfect place to hide or hurt. He saved the coordinates. The next move would require backup. But time was already against them. James stood in the middle of his office, lit only by the weak gray glow leaking through the window. The map was spread across the desk, pins and notes scattered around it like the aftermath of a storm. His eyes were locked on one specific mark, a faded red dot scribbled years ago during research on illegal hunting trails. It led to a forgotten cabin, buried deep in the woods near Grand Pine, once used by smugglers and later abandoned after a fire scared them off. The structure was never demolished. James had written a story about it once, calling it the loneliest place in Alberta. Now, it might be the most dangerous. He rubbed his face, exhaustion soaking into every bone. He hadn't told Emma his full suspicion yet. If he was wrong, it would only raise false hope. But if he was right... He opened his laptop again, revisited the parole files, and pulled up weather reports. Snow was coming. The window for action was closing. Meanwhile, in the darkness of the Grand Pine forest, a small flame danced from a dented kerosene lamp, casting long shadows across the warped wood walls of the old cabin. The place smelled of mold, gasoline, and damp fur. In the far corner of the room, 2 rusted cages sat against the wall. Inside one, Max curled up tightly, trying to stay warm. His golden fur was now matted with dirt, and a faint cut ran down his shoulder from earlier, when he had tried to force his way through the cage bars. He whimpered in his sleep, dreaming of home. Toby was in the other cage, smaller, darker, quieter. His black coat blended into the shadows. He hadn't made a sound in hours, not even when the man had screamed at them earlier. He had learned quickly. Noise brought attention, and attention brought pain. Travis Reed paced the room in slow, deliberate steps. He was in his early 40s, gaunt from years in prison, his skin weathered like old leather. A crooked scar cut through his jawline, thanks to Luna. He still touched it when he got angry, a nervous tic that had become instinct. He wore a grimy parka with the hood down, revealing thinning brown hair and a patchy beard. His eyes were narrow, bloodshot, and always darting, as if the walls themselves might turn on him. His mind, long corroded by anger and isolation, had only one thought left that truly mattered: revenge. Not against James. Not against the police. Against her. The dog. He approached the cages slowly, crouching to their level. "You think she's coming, don't you?" he said softly, voice cracking. "She's a tracker, a protector, but I want her to feel what I felt. Betrayed. Forgotten." He pulled a rag from his pocket, a piece of an old dog toy from the Reed property, now soaked in the pups' scent. He had dragged it through the snow earlier that day, leaving a trail behind the cabin, weaving it in deliberate lines toward the west edge of the woods. It wasn't just bait. It was theater. He smiled, a twitch in his cheek. Let her come. Miles away, Luna moved through the trees like smoke. The sky above had darkened, heavy with the promise of snow. The forest was familiar in shape, but distorted in silence. She moved low to the ground, her ears twitching at the faintest sound. A hunter in her prime, she had once tracked missing children through rain and gunmen through alleys. But now, she was older, slower, wounded. Yet something deeper drove her forward. She could smell Max, Toby, blood, urine, fear. The scents were old, hours past, but real. She passed a thin branch, broken recently. It reeked of Travis. Back at the house, Emma stood by the window. Her face was pale, eyes locked on the tree line. The wind howled low. She glanced at the dog bed by the fireplace. Empty. She heard the door and turned. James entered, dusted with frost. He looked older. Something about the way his mouth set told her he had made a decision. "There's a cabin," he said, "way out past the old log trails near Grand Pine. I think he's there." Emma didn't ask how he knew. She nodded. "Then we need to tell the police." "I will, but I need to go there first, just in case." She stepped forward, putting a hand on his chest. "Take someone. Don't do this alone." "I'll call Donna," he said quietly. Sergeant Donna Briggs picked up on the second ring. She had just come off a 12-hour shift, but her voice was sharp, alert. "You sure about this cabin?" she asked. "It's the only place that makes sense." She sighed. "Meet me at the station in an hour. I'll bring Carter." Officer David Carter was one of Clearwater's youngest patrol officers, barely 25, with sandy hair, an easy smile, and a loyal streak a mile wide. He'd been raised by his grandmother after his father vanished in a snowstorm when he was 6. That loss had shaped him. He never left things unfinished. He met James and Donna in the station garage, dressed in winter tactical gear. "We going to find those pups?" he asked, loading his shotgun with non-lethals. "We're going to try," Donna replied. They headed out in a single snow-equipped SUV, tires crunching over fresh flurries. As they drove, James shared everything he knew about Travis, the revenge, the cages. The drive took them deep into forestry land, then onto barely visible trails. By then, the sun was a pale disk behind thick clouds. The GPS cut out 10 miles in. The rest, they did by memory and instinct. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, Travis sat by the door, shotgun across his lap. The dogs had stopped moving. He hated the quiet. It made him think, made him remember. He pulled a flask from his coat and took a swig, then stood, walking to the cages. He opened Max's slowly, reaching in. The pup growled, a pathetic sound, but defiant. Travis grinned. "You've got your mama's fire. Let's see if she likes watching it die." He dragged Max outside, leaving Toby behind. He tied the dog's leash to a rusted hook on a tree just behind the cabin. The snow had started to fall. Then, from the woods, a sound, a low growl. Travis turned, mouth twitching. "She's here." Back in the cabin, Toby whimpered, ears twitching toward the door. The lantern flickered. Outside, Luna stepped out of the trees, slow and silent, eyes fixed on the man who had taken her children. The hunter had come for her prey. The storm began as a whisper. Snow drifted lazily between the trees, dusting the forest floor in silence. But within an hour, the wind sharpened its teeth, turning the whisper into a growl. The temperature plummeted, and visibility dropped to mere meters. It was the kind of cold that stripped heat from bone and made time feel slower, heavier. Luna moved through the forest, limping slightly. Her left paw was bleeding, a result of stepping into a steel-jawed hunting trap left partially buried under pine needles and snow. It hadn't broken the bone, but the metal had sliced into the flesh, leaving a crimson trail behind her. She had yelped when it happened, a short, pained cry, but she hadn't stopped. Not for long. Her head stayed low, her nose leading her forward through the thickening storm. The scent of her pups, soaked into fabric and bark and snow, was still fresh enough to follow. They were close. She could feel it. Behind her, the wind howled through the branches like a warning. At the same time, James, Donna, and Officer Carter trudged through the woods several kilometers away, trying to follow the faint impressions of Luna's path. It was Carter who noticed the first blood smear, a red dot on a snow-covered rock, half hidden by a fallen twig. He knelt beside it, brushing away the powdery flakes. "It's recent," he said, glancing back. Donna Briggs squinted through the falling snow. Her weathered face was creased with tension, lips tight, and she pulled her scarf higher over her mouth. "You sure?" Carter nodded. "Still wet. Body heat hasn't frozen it yet. She's ahead of us." James said nothing. He was breathing hard, his face flushed with cold and exertion, sweat freezing under his coat. His gloves were soaked, and a line of blood had dried where he'd bitten his lip earlier, realizing how easily this trail could go cold. But now, there was proof. She was alive, she was moving, and she was bleeding. Donna looked down the slope. "We keep going, slowly. If we lose the trail in this weather, we won't find her until spring." Meanwhile, inside the old cabin, Travis Reed sat at a wooden workbench, hunched over a small camera monitor. He had set up 2 cheap security cameras, one pointed at the front clearing where he had staked Max to the tree, and another watching the path behind the cabin. The screens flickered and glitched from the storm interference, but the batteries still held. Travis had a wiry frame, and in the glow of the lantern, his features looked skeletal. He had removed his coat, revealing tattoos along both arms, symbols and words that no longer made sense even to him. His hands trembled not from cold, but from adrenaline. His eyes never left the screen. In the corner of the room, Toby had begun to stir again. The little black pup sat up in his cage, ears forward, eyes wide. He sniffed the air and gave a soft, questioning whine. Travis turned. "Don't get excited yet, Mutt. The show's just starting." Outside, Max stood tethered to the tree, his leash taut. The snow clung to his fur, and his ears were flat against his head. He had tried to chew the rope, but failed. Every so often, he would bark, short and sharp, as if calling into the void. Then he stopped. His body stiffened. His eyes locked onto the tree line. A shadow emerged from the storm. Luna. She stepped into the clearing, slow and deliberate, blood marking each of her steps. Her eyes locked onto Max first. She didn't look at the cabin, or the windows, or the trees. Only him. Max gave a high-pitched yip and wagged his tail weakly. Inside the cabin, Travis stood up fast, knocking over his chair. He grabbed the shotgun from its mount near the door and checked the chamber. Loaded. He moved to the window, careful to stay low. "There you are," he whispered. He had planned for more time, planned to release Max when Luna was closer. Trap her. Make her watch. But she'd come sooner, limping, yes, but not broken, and she was alone. Travis opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The wind slammed into him like a wall, tearing at his coat. Snow stung his face, but he didn't flinch. He raised the shotgun and leveled it at her. "Don't move," he growled, as if expecting her to understand. Luna didn't stop. She took one more step, then another. Her body was tense, ears pinned back, tail low, eyes focused like a soldier entering a war zone. Travis took aim, but something moved behind the trees. He blinked. The camera flickered again on the monitor inside. A second figure appeared for a split second on the back path. Not Luna, Someone else. He turned his head just slightly, and that's when Luna charged. Not at him, at Max. She lunged toward her pup, snapping the rope with one bite, and shoved Max down with her paw, shielding him with her own body. The shot rang out. James, Donna, and Carter heard it. They froze. "That was close," Donna said, already raising her weapon. "Move, now." Back at the cabin, Travis lowered the gun. He'd missed. Barely. The recoil made him stumble back against the porch post. Luna was already turning, snarling, eyes wild with fury. Travis cursed and ducked back inside, slamming the door shut. He scrambled to the back of the cabin, pulled open a trapdoor in the floor, and dropped down into a crawl space lined with old survival gear and crates. It was dark, tight, but familiar. He moved like a rat in a tunnel, disappearing from view. Luna didn't pursue. She nuzzled Max gently, licking his ears, whining low in her throat. He responded by licking her chin. It was the first moment of calm in days. The wind roared louder. The snow thickened. From the trees, James and the others finally emerged. They saw her, standing like a statue, her body wrapped around her son, blood seeping from her leg. James fell to his knees beside her, breathless. "We found you," he whispered. Luna didn't look at him. Her eyes were still fixed on the cabin. The storm was in full roar now, hammering the trees and the cabin alike, turning the clearing into a swirling chaos of white. James crouched beside Luna, his breath ragged, one hand gripping the scruff of her blood-matted fur, the other pulling Max toward him. The pup trembled violently but didn't resist. His small chest heaved in shallow bursts, and his ears twitched with every gust of wind or crack of shifting timber. James looked into Luna's eyes. Those amber eyes, glazed with pain but still locked on the wooden door ahead, and he knew it wasn't over. Donna Briggs signaled to Officer Carter with a sharp nod. She raised her sidearm and crept along the outer wall of the cabin, boots crunching snow, her frame braced against the wind. Years on the force hadn't dulled her instincts. If anything, they'd sharpened with age. Her graying hair was tied tightly beneath a black beanie, her breath curling in fog as she stepped carefully onto the porch. Carter, trailing behind, was younger, lean, and alert. His narrow face, flushed with adrenaline, carried a look of dread mixed with resolve. He'd never fired his weapon in the line of duty before. Today might change that. Inside the cabin, Travis Reed moved like a man possessed. Blood dripped steadily from his right forearm, where Luna's jaws had clamped down only moments earlier. His coat sleeve was shredded, and his hand trembled as he tried to reload the shotgun. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. The sting of the wound wasn't nearly as sharp as the sting of failure. He had planned everything. The bait, the trail, the cameras, even the speech he would give when Luna died in front of her helpless pups. But now Max was free. Luna was alive, barely, and he could hear voices outside. "Don't screw this up," he hissed to himself, fumbling with a shell casing. It dropped to the floor, bouncing once before disappearing under a broken chair. And then came the sound he didn't expect. A soft whine. Toby. Travis turned sharply. The second pup, smaller, darker, was still in his cage, his tail tucked, but his eyes were on the open door. Max had left it ajar in the chaos. Travis started toward it, shotgun raised. Luna, sensing something, stood up. Her movements were slow and ragged, her front leg bleeding badly where the second shot had grazed her muscle. But she didn't collapse. She didn't cry out. She limped toward the cabin's open threshold, head low, breath hot and visible against the air. Her instincts weren't tactical anymore. They were primal. She moved faster than expected. Travis turned just as she lunged. The second impact knocked him sideways. Luna's teeth sank deep into his side, the force sending them both into the pile of crates near the wood stove. He screamed, not in pain, but in rage, lashing out with the butt of his shotgun. The blow landed square on Luna's shoulder, and she yelped, releasing him. He raised the weapon again, but Max, no longer the timid pup, charged from behind, nipping Travis's calf hard enough to make him stumble. It was the opening Luna needed. She sank her teeth into his wrist, the same one holding the shotgun, and twisted. The weapon clattered to the ground. That was the moment the door burst open. Donna led the way, firearm aimed with precision. "Freeze!" she shouted. "Hands where I can see them!" Travis tried to speak, but the only thing that left his mouth was a choked sound between a laugh and a snarl. He tried to run, slipping toward the trapdoor he had used before, but Carter tackled him from the side, slamming him hard against the wall. The two tumbled, fists flying. Carter, young but well-trained, recovered first. He pinned Travis down with one knee and cuffed his arms behind his back. It was over, for now. James stepped into the cabin last, cradling Max against his chest. The warmth from the wood stove did little to chase away the chill settling in his bones. His eyes swept the room, finding Luna by the center rug, slumped and panting, blood pooling beneath her. "Luna," he whispered, dropping beside her. Her eyes fluttered open at his voice. She was still breathing, still alive. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small GPS tracker, once part of Luna's old K9 collar, now a keepsake he'd kept on a keychain for sentimental reasons. Earlier that day, by some forgotten instinct, he had tapped it. A faint signal had activated, just enough to register on a backup server used by the local police. He hadn't even realized the battery still worked. "It brought us to you," he murmured. "You brought us." Toby, still in his cage, whimpered softly. James looked up, his voice tight. "Carter, I need bolt cutters." "I got it," Donna said, already crossing the room to the storage locker. Within moments, she pried the lock open. Toby crawled out, tail low, and pressed himself into James's side. A few minutes later, outside, Emma arrived. She burst from the patrol SUV before it had even stopped moving, coat flapping behind her, hair flying loose from its tie. She slipped on the ice and caught herself with a hand on the hood. Her eyes locked onto the open cabin door, then onto James, who stood at the threshold holding both puppies, Max in one arm, Toby in the other. And behind them, Luna. Emma dropped to her knees in the snow as James approached. Luna limped the last few steps herself. Her legs shook, her body trembled. But she moved forward, one breath at a time, until she reached Emma and collapsed gently into her lap. Emma wrapped her arms around the dog's massive frame, burying her face into the thick fur. Through tears and frozen lashes, she whispered, "God brought you back to me. He did." Luna let out a deep exhale and closed her eyes. Behind them, Carter stood guard over a handcuffed Travis, now half-conscious and moaning. Donna spoke into her radio, calling in medics and animal rescue. The storm had quieted. The woods were still again. But something unspoken remained in the air, a sense that something had shifted forever. Not just in the snow, or the cabin, or the cages, but in the hearts of those who had watched a mother bleed for her children. Snow melted slowly in Clearwater Ridge. Spring came not with warmth, but with the absence of cold. A gradual lifting of weight, like the town was collectively exhaling after holding its breath too long. The cabin had been sealed by the authorities, its contents documented, its broken windows boarded. The forest around it remained quiet, untouched since that day. But the house on Elmsworth Road, the one with the fenced yard and red mailbox, began to fill again with life. Inside, Emma crouched on the floor of the living room, gently brushing Luna's coat. The German Shepherd now wore a soft orthopedic sleeve over the stump where her front leg had been. The amputation had been necessary. There was no saving the shattered limb. But even on 3 legs, Luna stood tall. Her eyes were steady again. Her tail wagged when the boys came near. She had returned. Not the same, but whole in every way that counted. Emma looked tired but lighter, like someone who had carried too much grief, and now, finally, had somewhere to set it down. Her freckles had faded through winter, but her eyes, green, wide, filled with fire, watched Luna like a mother who had nearly lost a child. Emma had changed. She smiled more now, though still quietly. She often kept her hand resting on Luna's shoulder, as if needing constant reassurance that she was still here. Max had recovered quickly, bounding through the house with the same clumsy confidence he had before the abduction. His golden fur had grown thick again, hiding the faint scar on his shoulder. He was louder now, more protective. When strangers came to the door, he would plant himself between them and his family, not growling, just watching. Toby was different. The smaller, darker pup barely left the corner of the living room during the first few weeks home. His once bright eyes stayed dulled, his ears lowered, his mouth silent. Not once had he barked, not even when Max barked first. Emma had tried everything: treats, toys, gentle training, but trauma is patient. It doesn't rush to leave. It was James who noticed the breakthrough. He'd been working late at the kitchen table, surrounded by notes, police statements, audio recordings. He was putting the final touches on his article, one that had grown far beyond his original plan. At 3:14 a.m., he heard the smallest sound, a single high-pitched bark. He turned. Toby stood at the edge of the hallway, tail wagging slowly. James didn't say a word. He just smiled. The article went live the following week, titled "The Trap Set for Loyalty." It appeared first in a regional magazine, then got picked up by national outlets. Within days, the inbox James shared with Emma was flooded. Letters of outrage, of support, of sorrow. Some wrote to say they'd cried. Others sent donations. One woman in Missouri offered to cover Luna's medical expenses in full. A retired police officer in Detroit asked for a copy of the article to be read at his K-9 partner's memorial. But the article itself wasn't about rage. James didn't name Travis Reed until the final third. The story, he decided, wasn't about him. It was about the silence of animals, the bravery that had no language, about what we owe those who protect us, and what happens when evil underestimates love. He described the night, the storm, the trail of blood. He recounted Max's rope being snapped, Luna throwing herself between danger and her son, Emma's voice trembling over the dog's fur. But the paragraph most shared online was this: "We had no map, no GPS, no clear path through the storm, only a broken signal, a wounded dog, and a mother's will. And yet somehow, we were not lost. Somehow something unseen walked with us." He never used the word God, but it was there, between the lines. Travis was sentenced to 19 years in prison, multiple counts of animal cruelty, kidnapping, unlawful possession of a firearm, attempted murder. The judge, an older man with deep jowls and silver hair combed neatly back, read aloud part of James's article during the hearing. Travis showed no emotion, no apology, no acknowledgement. He stood in his orange jumpsuit with his hands folded, eyes half-lidded, as if this was all beneath him. But James didn't care. He hadn't written the article for Travis. He had written it for Luna, and for Toby, and for anyone who had ever thought the world wouldn't believe their pain just because they couldn't speak it. In the weeks that followed, the house changed. James set up a small writing nook near the back window, where Luna liked to lie and watch the trees sway. He added a framed photo above the desk. Luna, standing in the snow, blood on her coat, eyes forward. Emma began volunteering at the nearby animal shelter. There she met Nora, the manager, a plump woman in her early 60s with short, salt-gray curls and a raspy voice. Nora had once been a school teacher, but left the job after her husband passed away from cancer. She'd always loved animals more than people, she joked. Emma and Nora clicked instantly. The shelter became a place of quiet healing for both of them. Emma started bringing Max and Toby once a week, helping socialize the other rescues. And over time, Toby began to wag his tail more. Even the neighbors changed. People who had once simply waved from their porches now stopped to ask about Luna, to pet her if she came close, to thank her. Children would come to the fence and toss tennis balls. Luna rarely chased them, her leg made running hard, but she'd sit, regal, watching, tail swishing slowly, a silent guardian. One afternoon, Emma caught James staring out the window with a distant look. "What is it?" she asked. He shook his head. "I've been thinking, maybe the story's not over. Maybe there's more to say." She stepped beside him. "You mean another article?" "Maybe something longer," he said. "A book. Not just about Luna. About all of it. The things that survive." She nodded. "I think it's a good idea." Luna stirred in her bed at the sound of their voices. She stretched slowly, then laid her head back down, eyes still open. In the quiet that followed, James returned to his desk. He opened a new document. The title line blinked, and then, with steady fingers, he typed, "Growl in the Dark." It was the first truly warm day in Clearwater Ridge since the snow melted, and sunlight filtered through the budding leaves like soft gold. A breeze carried the scent of damp pine and distant blossoms. In most homes along Elmsworth Road, windows were open. Children's voices rang in the yards, and neighbors waved over fences as if the darkness of winter had never come. But inside the Reed house, spring was something quieter, something earned. James stood barefoot on the back porch, a mug of lukewarm coffee in his hands. The air was fresh, sweet with the promise of new beginnings, but he wasn't watching the flowers. His eyes were on Luna, lying in the grass below, her body half in the shade, half in the sun. Her three-legged frame looked at peace, until she tried to sit up. She failed the first time. Then again. The third time, she managed to rise, chest heaving with effort. She was slower now, thinner than she had been before the surgery, but there was still strength in her bones. Not the kind of strength that runs fast or jumps high, but the kind that endures. She took a step forward, and then another. James exhaled and smiled softly. Behind him, the door creaked. Emma leaned against the frame, her strawberry hair loose, a smudge of flour on her cheek. She'd been baking since dawn, filling the house with cinnamon and something warm and nostalgic. Her face was calm, but not without weight. Grief doesn't vanish with the snow. It lingers, tucked in corners like dust, only noticeable when the sun hits just right. "She walked all the way to the tree today," James said without turning. Emma smiled faintly. "She's stubborn. She's brave. She's ours." Inside, Max and Toby dozed together in their crate, the door wide open. Toby had taken to sleeping with one paw on his brother's back, like a reassurance that nothing would disappear again. He still startled easily, flinched at sudden movements, refused to go near the front door. But he barked now, and played, and wagged his tail when Emma called his name. Healing, like spring, didn't arrive all at once. It grew. That evening, James and Emma sat in the living room with a guest, Harold Sutton, a retired K-9 officer and longtime friend of Donna Briggs. Harold was in his late 60s, tall and wiry, with a weathered face and kind gray eyes. He had a limp from an old training accident and a voice like gravel rubbed smooth. He had worked with K9S for over 3 decades and had trained dogs like Luna. When he'd heard about what happened, he'd driven 5 hours just to meet her. "She reminds me of my old girl, Molly," he said, stroking Luna's ear as she lay at his feet. "Took a bullet for me back in '97. These dogs, they'll die for us before we ask them to." "She almost did," James replied, voice low. Harold nodded. "That's what makes them special. They don't need medals, they need memory." James showed him a draft of the book, the manuscript for Growl in the Dark. Harold read the first 10 pages in silence, then looked up with eyes that shimmered. "People need to hear this," he said. "It's not just about her. It's about everything she stood for." Outside, the last light of day dipped below the tree line, and shadows stretched long across the yard. A hush settled over the house. Later that night, James sat at his desk, adding the final lines to the epilogue. He wrote about Travis Reed's sentencing, about the messages they still receive from strangers who had read the article. He wrote about Luna's missing leg, about Toby's silence, and the weight Max seemed to carry now in the way he watched over his brother. He wrote about the way the forest still seemed to whisper when the wind rose just right, like it hadn't yet forgotten what it had seen. And he ended with this: "The world is full of noise, but it's the quiet things, the silent courage, the wordless love, that carry us when we're too broken to walk alone. In our darkest hours, it's not always a voice that saves us. Sometimes it's a paw. Sometimes it's a scar. And sometimes it's the silence itself." He saved the file and closed the laptop. When he turned around, he saw Luna lying near the fireplace, eyes open, breathing steady. Max and Toby were curled beside her, heads resting against her ribs. The fire crackled softly, casting gold across their fur. James crossed the room, knelt beside them, and whispered, "Thank you." Not for surviving, but for staying. The next morning, the town gathered at the community center. A fundraiser had been organized, Emma's idea, to support a new program for retired K9S in Alberta. Flyers featured a picture of Luna standing in the snow with Max and Toby on either side, their names bold above the slogan, "Loyalty deserves a second chapter." Families came with dogs. Children came with stories. Someone brought a service dog named Daisy, who had survived a house fire. Another brought Rex, a German shepherd who had once been lost for 18 days in the Yukon. Luna sat on a small stage, her stump gently patted, her gaze calm as dozens came to see her. She didn't bark. She didn't whine. She simply stayed. And when a little girl, shy, 6 years old, with 2 hearing aids and a flower in her braid, came up and knelt beside her, Luna leaned forward and licked the girl's cheek. The girl laughed for the first time all week. James watched from the back of the room, heart full. He didn't believe in miracles the way others did, but he believed in grace, in second chances, in survivors who kept walking, even when their steps weren't even. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come with thunder or lightning. They come quietly, through a wounded paw that still moves forward, a puppy who finds his voice again, or a mother who refuses to let fear win. Luna didn't ask for praise. She didn't speak. She simply believed that love was worth bleeding for, and that the ones we protect are never too far to save. In the darkest woods, when the trail was cold and the storm was rising, they didn't have a map. But God was still there. He was in the courage of a broken dog, the heartbeat of a child's laugh, and the quiet faith of a family that refused to give up. So, if you're going through a storm, if you feel lost, unheard, or afraid, remember, sometimes, even in the silence, God is still guiding your way. May the Lord bless you and your loved ones, and may He give you the strength to keep walking, even on the hardest days. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us, have you ever witnessed an act of courage or compassion that changed you? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories of love, survival, and the quiet miracles that still happen every single day. God bless you. And remember, some heroes wear uniforms, some walk on four legs,